Good afternoon, and welcome to Talk the Line with Matt Pinsker. We have a very special guest here today, John Shinholser, who has saved many lives across Virginia through his McShins Foundation. I first heard about his program when I was in court one day. I had a judge who didn't want to let a client out because he was afraid he'd use drugs and overdose. The lawyer said he's in McShins, and the judge let him out. It was a magic ticket. This man has done more good than more people will ever know. I've met many mothers whose sons were saved by his program, as well as represented many people whose program has saved their lives. So I'd like to get the man here in the podcast studio so we could actually talk about the work he's done in his own background. So why don't you introduce yourself to everyone?
Well, hey, Matt, thanks for having me. I am John Shinholser. I'm a person in long-term recovery from substance use disorders. For me, that means I've been clean and sober over 36 and a half years. And doing so has allowed me to become a pretty good father, son, husband, member in the community, as well as a civic leader and a founder of a nonprofit charity that helps thousands of people over the years. So.
And you're a Marine too, aren't you?
I am a Marine. That is true.
When did you join the Marine Corps?
I enlisted January 16th, 1980, and I arrived in boot camp January 18th, 1980.
How was that? A lot of fun?
It was an eye-opener. That's how my first introduction to recovery was in Marine Corps boot camp, but I wasn't there for recovery, so I did use after boot camp.
Okay. Well, how did you fall into drugs in the first place?
Well, just, drugs are everywhere in the community. And, whatever neighborhood you grow up in, sooner or later you're going to fall into them. I grew up in the west end of Richmond. I attended St. Bridget's Catholic schools. And just, alcohol was the first big drug we got into. And then after alcohol was, cigarettes, alcohol, pot, acid, cocaine, pills, and then, from, everything else that you can think of. But just in the neighborhood.
How old were you when you first started using?
I was probably 11, 12 years old when I first started getting high off alcohol.
Wow.
At a young age.
How did you get into it at such a young age? I mean, many 10 year olds wouldn't
alcohol was always prevalent. Every house in the neighborhood had a counter full of alcohol. And, it wasn't hard to take. Back in them days, we weren't scared to go to the store and steal a bottle of wine or a quart of beer. So it was accessible. It was very easy to get. So we just fell into it one day, a bunch of us kids making tree forts, and one day we just started drinking, Well, first it was smoking cigarettes, and then it was drinking alcohol. And that was, hell, I guess back, between 6th and 7th grade. I graduated when I was 17, so I was young when I started.
That was a young age. Now, obviously, you weren't 11, 12 years old when you entered the Marine Corps.
No, the Marine Corps, a little different story there.
Now, were you using drugs in your time in the Marine Corps?
Well, that's a funny story. I believe I used addictively from the first time I got high. And I like getting high, and I chase getting high. And when I say get high, that's any drug I could get hold of. But, alcohol, pot, acid, they were the main drugs back in the 70s when I was using heavy. And, even though I was a paint contractor and wallpaper hanger by trade, I made a lot of money. I did really good. I traveled the country. I kept being unmanageable, because if you have the substance use disorders, which is, a verifiable illness, a disease, if you have that disease, part of it is unmanageability. And that plays out in your lifestyle. So no matter where I went or what I did or how much money I made or didn't make, I kept ending up broke. And, one day I came to in Denver, Colorado, actually a little town called Aurora, outside of Denver. And it was cold one morning, January 16th. I'm standing on a street corner, broke, homeless. I just blew all my money. And I had a lot of money. And there I am again, and I see a Navy recruiting poster. It's not just a job, it's an adventure. So out of nowhere, light bulb goes off, and I crossed that street to join the Navy. And the only one in there that early was a Marine recruiter. And that's how I ended up in the Marine Corps. And that was, I walked in that recruiter on a Wednesday, and I'm in boot camp on Friday.
That's incredible.
It's an amazing story.
Now it takes months for someone to make it.
Now it does, but back then, the Iranian hostage situation was heating up. So we were all, gung-ho sure we were going to war. And there's actually a little more to that story, too. When I went in boot camp, I only went in for a 3-year Marine. But they told me, when I got there, just tell the drill instructor what you want to be, which was a joke. But oddly enough, because I tested so high, they did give me an opportunity to extend for a year in boot camp, and I could be anything I wanted to be, basically. And I can remember distinctly getting ready to jump off the second-story ledge to break my leg to get the heck out of there. And right before I did that, the drill instructor called me in his office, his duty hut, and explained to me that if I did one of these other duties, if I extended for a year, I could pick my own job. And I didn't want nothing to do with that. I'm convinced I'm getting out of here in about 20 minutes. But I looked at the list because I had to. And all the way, and it had aircraft mechanic, computer operator, all kind of nice jobs. But the last job offer and the last word, all the way down the bottom of that piece of paper to the right, the sentence was field radio operator Hawaii. And I saw that word Hawaii. And I'm thinking hula dancers and Hawaiian reefer. So I extended for a year on the spot. And I ended up going to Hawaii, the Hawaiian Marine. I was attached to the 1st Battalion, 3rd Marines. I deployed 3 times. But my first deployment, we were in the Straits of Hormuz when they freed the Iranian hostages. So, in my alcoholic, drug addict mind, I'm joining the Marine Corps to go fight the Iranians, having no idea a year later I'd be in the Straits of Hormuz, locked and loaded, ready to go fight the Iranians. Of course, President Reagan got inaugurated. They released them. So there was an ending to that craziness there for me. So
now let me just check, make sure the podcast is going. Things are going well. Now, what happened when did you get out of the Marine Corps? What happened next?
While I was in the Marine Corps, I kept getting what you probably well know is an Article 15.
Oh yeah.
And when you're out at sea,
for those who are unfamiliar, that's non-judicial punishment for the military. It's not criminal. It's not courts martial. But it's administrative, loss of rank, sanctions.
It'd be like a misdemeanor.
Exactly.
Right. And then if you got a captain's mass or a colonel's court,
That's the Navy term for Article 15 for non-judicial.
Well, I got 5 of those in my first
5?
2.5 years.
That's impressive.
I know. And I was a very good Marine. I mean, I was the best radio man in the Marine Corps one year, and I did some great stuff. But, the Marine Corps paid me twice a month. So twice a month I got to use like I like to use. Finally, one day the colonel came to me, and the colonel, basically his exact words was, "Boy, you got 2 choices. You can either go to the brig and get a bad conduct discharge, or you can go to rehab." Now, keep in mind, I'd been arrested 12 times, 4 times in a foreign country, by the time I was 23 years old, standing before that colonel. And there was 2 things I knew about the brig. One is the food sucked, and the women were fake. So I went to rehab, and that was August 10th, 1982, and that to this day is my clean date still. So I'm what they call a 3%er. I went to rehab one time, and 3% of the people that go to rehab one time stay clean and sober the rest of their life, and so far that's my story.
So why do you think that is? Why only 3%ers in that?
Well, addiction is a chronic illness, and relapse is very much a part of it for most people. For 97% of the people, relapse is going to happen. And a lot of people, you got to realize when you're getting high, that's the love of your life. For an addict, that's the number one cause of all their problems, but they're the last ones to see it. So they always want to test the waters. Nobody wants to think, especially my age, 23 years old, or young people. A lot of young people go to treatment, go to rehab. They can't imagine they're giving up alcohol for the rest of their life, or giving up the bong hit for the rest of their life. They all say the same thing, like, I never had a problem drinking, it was heroin I had a problem with, or I never had a problem with acid, it was, drinking I had a problem with, or weed doesn't hurt nobody. Well, for an addict, one's too many, 1,000 never enough. And, we substitute one form of using for another. And I heard all that stuff, and I was surrounded by good people in recovery that just really made it crystal clear to me that I was better off never going back to using, live a recovery lifestyle, and I have a good life. So I kind of, I believed them. I had great support. I had wonderful treatment, wonderful therapists, wonderful counselors, wonderful inpatient, wonderful outpatient, wonderful 12-step support groups, wonderful sponsorship, home group, service work. I did everything they said, and my life got really good, and has been really good for a long time.
So what sets McShin apart from other forms of recovery? What makes for an effective recovery program in your mind?
Yeah, see, McShin, the reason we got started was we noticed a lot of addicts and alcoholics weren't getting help, and by the time they were getting help, it was too little too late. So we saw basically a criminal justice system and a community support service system that was not doing the best they could do. The battle cry forever has always been, you help an addict or an alcoholic when they ask for help. And you have a short window of opportunity. Sometimes that window of opportunity is 30 minutes. Sometimes it's 4 hours. But it's usually that day you better help them or you're going to lose them. And we just saw that so many people were trying to get help, showing up at our 12-step meetings, but there was nowhere for them to go in between meetings. There was no real treatment, no recovery center. Their only option was to go get high that night and risk going to jail. See, an addict, if you keep him in the public safety theater of operation, you're going to end up in the public safety theater of operation. You're going to end up in the criminal justice system, emergency room, or dead, or all three. So we just saw a need to have an option for addicts and alcoholics. So that's how McShin got started, was just a vision. It came up quick one night over a campfire at a 12-step fellowship camp out. On a Saturday night, we got the vision. On Monday morning, we incorporated McShin. That quick, within 48 hours.
That's impressive.
Yeah.
And I know McShin's has an impressive network, a lot of people through it. Can you talk about the network, the housing? Because it sounds like what sets you apart is you're not just counselors, but you actually create a social
most of our
safety
staff is in recovery. We've been there, we've done that, we lived a life. And we're called peer facilitators, peer leaders, peer coaches, mentors. And, we got about 20 staff. We got a 15,000 square foot recovery center over at the whole west wing of Hatcher Memorial Baptist Church over in Lakeside area of Henrico County. We have over 100 recovery beds, sober house beds, recovery residences, but, over 100 beds. And we have over 2,500 social support groups and meetings a year, open to the public, free and open to the public.
2,500.
Over 2,500, might be 2,800 by now.
And they can find this on a website.
Most 12-step programs have a meeting schedule, and you can probably see something over at Hatcher Church. We're very easy to find. Most people in and around the recovery industry, whether it be treatment, counselor, public safety, they probably heard of us and know where we're at. We're on a lot of people's websites. But it's such an amazing organization run by amazing people doing amazing work. It's just not by accident we get a lot done. We're very, very effective, very inexpensive, and the outcomes are incredible. We collected data all this time, and our data clearly demonstrates a 40% reduction in the impact that addiction has on our community. 40% reduction.
That's incredible.
What that means is that 40% less people are going to end up in the emergency room. They're going to end up 40% less people will die. 40% less people will return to the criminal justice system. That's just an amazing numbers.
Well, something that drives me crazy about the entire addiction issue is that the courts, the criminal justice system, is the first line where people even have their chance to get recovery. How would you like to see that changed?
Like this General Assembly session, for example.
Okay.
Like I'm reading today's paper, and I'm looking at the laws they passed. They doubled down on the war on drugs. They just committed to another $50 million a year for prisons and jails in Virginia, and convictions in Virginia. Another $50 million of taxpayers' money. I did not see one bill where they spent $1 on authentic recovery support service providers. The McShins Foundation, the last 15 years, we have saved over $100 million from people not going to jail or prison or the emergency rooms. $100 million. Now, you would think a policymaker would jump up and down and praise us and see to it that the General Assembly were to invest in this type of system. We're getting just the opposite from them, though.
Why is that? That doesn't make sense.
Because it's just a big machine. Addiction, Substance use disorders is going to one day be looked upon as the most exploited illness ever in this country. We exploit people with the mental illness, substance use disorders. We throw all this money at criminal justice systems, at public funded systems, at treatment systems, and the outcome is dismal at best. So you have whole industries that rely on this exploitation. I do not know, and I've never heard of this. Now, you might know of something that I don't know, but I've never heard of one police department, one sheriff's department, one jail, one prison trying to give back 10% of their budget every year, trying to reduce the size of their organization. They all want more money, more budget, bigger organizations. All government-funded agencies want more, they want bigger, not less. Well, if you did not have ridiculous drug laws and broken systems of care for mental illness, substance use disorders, you would not have a need for the size of all these agencies. So special interest is where the problem lies. And it's supported by the citizen. The citizens really don't care. That retired school teacher, that fireman, they want their pension invested in industries that make them money. And you cannot find McShin on the Wall Street exchange. It's just not there. But you can find all these industries that fund all these agencies there. You know, GEO damn near doubled 6 months after Trump became president, publicly traded on Wall Street. Just follow the money, you know, and you'll see why this illness is exploited so bad. And one of the sad parts about it is people don't even realize it. It happened through osmosis almost.
You know, I admit, when I first moved back to Richmond, Virginia after finishing school, I had no idea. Started practicing law, and left and right, I was saying, what's going on here? Kept hearing about the same drugs all over again, about the opioid issue. And it's then an explosion. I went to Govan High School, and back then, I know a couple of kids would smoke pot in the bathroom. Now I'm representing children, not adults, but children out of our local schools, high schools, middle schools, who are suffering from addiction. And I hate seeing them being treated like criminals. I want them to get treatment. So what do you think the answer lies? Do you support full decriminalization? Or what about the dealers? Or the doctors? There's a lot of approaches. I'd like to get your thoughts.
Here's my new battle cry.
Okay.
Number one, there's definitely a war on recovery. It's clear because all the funding goes for the war on drugs, not the war on, not recovery. So we're not supported. And we have the same gatekeepers in charge of our systems. You got criminal justice in charge of the money and the rules and the regulations and the laws. You got public safety in charge. You have government agencies in charge. But you have people like us, organizations all across America. We're showing that 40% reduction in the impact addiction's having in the community, yet we get zero opportunity to create policy and reimbursements or funding. So we need a new gatekeeper. America needs a new gatekeeper for our resources for addiction. It's plain and simple. The old gatekeepers, it doesn't work when it comes to recovery. You see, Matt, recovery is the solution for addiction. And the best way to get recovery is like I got it, through recovery support service providers, authentic recovery support service providers. So the solution is we have got to build up, bring to scale our capacity for recovery support service providers, the authentic recovery community model. We use that, and 50% of our addiction issues go away pretty much overnight.
Just for clarification, when you say community model, you mean each person suffering and in recovery having a social network for support?
Well, it begins with the addict and the alcoholic knowing they need help. They're not going to go ask for help because they're scared they're going to go to jail or get rejected, because help doesn't exist unless you're rich or you're lucky. So when somebody asks for help, if you have imagine this, a marketing campaign where every time you turn on a TV, you had several good-looking guys and girls smiling, laying on a bearskin rug, say, "Hey, addiction your issue? You need help with drinking? Well, excuse me. Well, come see us. Check into recovery. We got you covered. We got great recovery. It's right over here. If you can afford the AAA club, great. But if not, we'll provide you single A. We got you covered though. When you ask for help, you need help. You got to market and promote that, And people will come out of the woodwork to get help. Nobody wants to go to jail. These guys and girls don't want to be running around living on the street, sticking needles in their arms. No, some do, but most of them don't. So if you provide that culture of compassion, love, and understanding, you'll get an incredibly tangible result. But if we keep doubling down on criminal justice, we're going to keep getting more death and more correction costs that we don't need to be having.
I agree. We can't incarcerate our ways out of it, nor should we. Now, at the same time, people are making a lot of money by things being criminalized. At the same time, looking at states like Florida, they're seeing pushback because a lot of I'll call them fake recovery networks.
Well,
how do you avoid that? Because there are fake programs give ones like yours a bad name. So how do you combat that?
Well, I was down in Florida a few weeks ago, and I rode around with the drug czar of Broward County, and that's like ground zero for the addiction epidemic in the state. And they're doing all kind of stuff down there. They're trying, but it's still the same criminal justice system everywhere I go. The way how you combat it is family members got to come out the woodwork. Look at the AIDS model. When all these people were dying of AIDS and HIV, not only were the people with the illness marching and trying to come up with solutions, but the family members were marching too. So if we don't get the families out there, but then again, the families don't want less return on their 401k. So they've made that connection. So it's almost as if these families are donating their welfare, their loved ones, for their retirement fund. It's the craziest thing I've ever seen. We got ourselves in a quagmire that we're going to have to follow these simple suggestions to get out of. But you got to keep going back to recovery being a solution for addiction. You look at these foreign countries like Portugal, great model. Look at all these states that legalize marijuana for recreational use. They have less opiate addiction, less Suboxone clinics, or buprenorphine and methadone clinics. They have less addiction in these states where they have legalized marijuana for recreational use. So, you mentioned just legalize it all. I think marijuana should be treated like alcohol. It's ridiculous that it's not. That's the most racist law you'll ever see in your life. I hope your listeners just Google marijuana laws, the Marijuana Stamp Act of 1937, the Harrison Act of 1917. But the marijuana law was created by racists for racial purposes, and it's done a good job. And if you know your war on drugs, you know that Richard Nixon really started pumping a lot of money into the criminal justice system, which sucked up all the consumers from the treatment center, publicly funded treatment center. There's a big bell curve, you'll notice, where when Nixon's money started hitting the streets for criminal justice and every president thereafter pumped in more and more money, the attic line got sucked into this criminal justice funded system, and they actually gave less money for substance abuse services at the federal to state level during the same period. And of course, the recovery outcomes were dismal. Now, we do have the same amount of addicts per population today as we did 100 years ago.
So all the money and same outcome.
All the money it was all about criminal justice system buildup. It was about the war on drugs and all the cottage industries that fed Wall Street and Main Street. There was actually an analyst did a report about 15 years ago that said if we reduced by 5% the economical impact addiction has on America, we'll be in the worst depression this country's ever seen. So America's addicted to the money that the industry brings, that the disease brings.
That's incredible.
And you know what? It's so true. You got to ask yourself, why does CIA and Congress support the import of all these drugs all these years into America? Just follow the war on drugs. Freeway Rick from California. Google Freeway Ricky Ross.
Well, I'm thinking about I was down on the border doing issues, taking cases involving the Mexican drug cartels. When we wiped out the Colombians, the Mexican cartels stepped up.
Well, all that's illegal, there's a black market. Did we learn our lesson in Prohibition? Can't we do better than that? All Prohibition did was create a black market and thugs and gangsters. And then it took away resources from our agencies and our communities. there's a lot to be learned from that.
Well, let me ask you this: if everything was made, well, decriminalized, I wouldn't per se made legal, decriminalized, do you think there'd be the same usage, less usage? What do you think would be the change would be in the?
Well, I think treat marijuana like alcohol.
What about the harder drugs, heroin, cocaine?
You got to decriminalize them. You can't. It's hard to treat them like alcohol and tobacco and sugar. Cocaine you could probably do that way, but I'm not so sure about heroin. You might want to just decriminalize that one.
Some drugs seem to rob people of their sense of free will or their means to control themselves.
You're gonna see a spike in addiction, but it'll level off. The opiate is probably the worst one.
What makes that so different compared to everything else that we've discussed?
Physical addiction. You get physically addicted really quick. And
how is that different from? Can you explain to listeners how that's different from mental addiction as well?
Well, you got drugs like cocaine and marijuana. They're most people you could do it regularly and stop and not be so physically addicted. But if you do opiates regularly, if you do opiates more than 2 weeks, you got a physical addiction to where if you stop, it's like you get the worst flu of your life. And anybody that's had a really bad flu, at the peak of your flu, you're telling yourself, I wish I were dead. This would be a good day to die. And all you got to do is put a drug in your body that it gets you well instantly. Who wouldn't do that? And that's what opiate withdrawal is all about. But we have such great drugs for withdrawal, utilized and unutilized. They got a drug you can buy damn near anywhere in America known as kratom. You can take kratom. You can use kratom, which is perfectly legal to buy it in most states. It's only outlawed in a few states. But kratom is like the best symptom reducer of the withdrawal from opiates. It's a really bad withdrawal symptom comes with opiate.
Why would some states make it illegal if it's so good?
Well, because like America has over 6 million kratom consumers. And a kratom consumer typically would probably consume 3 prescriptions on any given day that they're not consuming. So that's 18 million prescriptions a month taken off of the American market. So there again, Wall Street, Main Street. Remember, FDA controls pharmaceutical drugs, which is funded. The FDA is funded by Big Pharma, and the DEA is the police force of pharma and the FDA. And the three of them are all in bed together on this issue. Kratom is not that dangerous of a drug. You can't overdose or die from it. Out of 6 million consumers, they might have 1 or 2 people that died that had no other drug in their body, but that still doesn't mean that's what killed them. So it's like the lowest hanging fruit drug out there, and they want to demonize it, make it like heroin. And they tried to put it on a Schedule I a couple years ago, and they actually had a big pushback on that, and it didn't happen. But they're still trying to demonize it and Schedule I it.
What's been your feedback or pushback from politicians when you tell them everything you're telling me? You're an authority on the subject. You know better than people sitting in the
politicians, they're just such nice, polite, decent people. They all come through at election time, they talk to you and you give them a contribution, you vote for them, they all say they want to help, but very few of them ever put a bill out there that can actually make a difference in our world. So most politicians, it's just rhetoric. They really can't do nothing. They don't want to do nothing. Or look at it like this. Look at this. Just back up on special interest groups. Who funds the campaigns? Addicts typically don't fund politicians' campaigns, and you need a lot of money to run a campaign. And a congressional race, hell, you need $1 million to run congressional, and you got to raise that money every 2 years. So every 2 years, you got Big Pharma giving you money and criminal justice agencies giving you money. All these associations and trade groups giving you money. So of course, you're going to only pass laws and bills that accommodate these people. So that's one of the bad things about America and our lawmaking system. It's all about special interests.
Now, have you found any politicians who have been receptive, who have been working with you?
Well, in my case,
And maybe are these people who are self-funding?
over the years, it's kind of odd. A lot of people would say, well, Democrats, shouldn't that be their issue, or Republicans, or whatever? You know, a handful of Democrats and Republicans over the years have tried to help get some bills passed for us. Before he lost his election, Delegate O'Bannon was very useful. He helped get the Narcan bill passed, and Betsy Carr helped get the self-supporting bill, the Good Samaritan bill passed, and Delegate Peace tried to get some funding for us one time. I'm trying to think if there's anybody else out there. You know, and when we go to try to get a bill passed, it's all these special interests that oppose it. You know, I can go to a committee here and have 100 people in favor of a bill, and really they may not have nobody oppose it, but the committee is a committee full of lawyers, and they kill the bill. You know, they just, it's the damnedest thing I've ever seen. And these I'm talking to politicians whose kids have died of addiction, and you would think they'd be inclined to help improve the outcomes, but they don't. It's just weird.
Is there anything? Is there anything other than the money that's creating the holdup? Are there? I mean, we've spent a lot of time talking about the funding. Is it lack of education, or is it just all come down to money?
You know, I think the recovering community and their family members, we just got to do a better job reducing the stigma, because it's total stigma. I mean, they pass laws and bills, they don't have a clue what they're doing, but it's clearly they're doing it for a special interest purpose or the money. They got no idea how many people they just killed by this law or that bill. Maybe if they knew, they wouldn't do it. You know, and I mean, I got a lot of examples year in and year out, some of the stuff they've said and some of the things I've heard and some of the evidence that got totally disregarded. It's just...
What's been some of the dumbest things you've seen them do?
Well, I can remember at one of the governors, what they call that? You know, one of the governors' summits, they had this big hootenanny up in Charlottesville. You know, hundreds of people were there, and we were talking about Good Samaritan bills, safe supporting bills. You know, if somebody's overdosing, you know, make the phone call, you know, but give the people immunity. You know, don't arrest them for making a phone call. You know, and they actually that year, I believe it was a woman. I believe she was the chairman of the Commonwealth Attorneys Association. She said something along the lines that, well, we're really not here to save lives. We're here to get drug convictions, and we do not want to pass up the opportunity for a drug conviction. If it, you know,
that's terrible.
They didn't get it.
Well, I mean, a prosecutor's job isn't even to get the convictions; it's to do justice. Now, we might disagree over what justice looks like, but
most of them, they don't want any bill to ever pass that might give up an opportunity for an arrest, especially a drug arrest. Even if it saves a life, they'd much rather have the drug arrest and a lost life than have a saved life and miss a drug arrest. And they actually repeated that again last year when we tried to get that Good Samaritan law strengthened. But this year they got a little hit on it. I noticed when a lawyer went to a lawyer to get help, they got a little bump in it this year. Dillon law got passed. But at the same time, they made it so that if you use drugs with somebody and they die, you're going to get 5 years in prison. So you just negated, you know, strengthening one law, you negated it by passing another law. So, you know, there's a lot of what they call watering down bills, or they might give it up in one area but take it back in another area. They're famous for that down there at the General Assembly.
I will say, though, it seems like in a very short amount of time, large part maybe because of the work of your organization, or just because knowing people suffering from addiction in their neighborhood, or having families that have suffered loss. People are starting to come around on addiction. The stigma's changing. People are realizing these aren't necessarily bad people. Regular people who, you know, maybe someone who was on a surgery, as you said, for over 2 weeks on painkillers afterwards. Thinking of a number of people I've represented here in the community. You know, someone suffered an injury, maybe on the job, work-related surgery. They use painkillers as prescribed for 4 weeks, 6 months, however long it takes. They're never next surprised this person is suffering from is hooked on drugs afterwards, so they're cut off. Would you say attitudes have changed though since you started working with recovery?
Well, I think back during the 80s and 90s when the crack epidemic struck, crack is black, lock 'em up,
Well, it's interesting.
Dope is white, give them hope, So,
so what's interesting is a lot of the legislation regarding crack was actually being sponsored by black legislators who didn't like what was going on in their communities. That's one of the craziest parts.
Well, I don't know if there's an old saying about, if you look at like the history, like Martin Luther King, he busted his butt getting civil rights. But as soon as he got killed and the civil rights percolated to the top, a whole lot of different factions busted off, divided up the loot, as you might say, the spiritual, mental, physical, emotional outcome. They divided up, but what they did, they dropped the ball. And, back in slave days, I guess they called that Uncle Tom's, they're everywhere. So you have to Google it, look it up. But it's basically where somebody will sell out the movement for money. And the same happens today in these lawmaking deals. People are selling other people out, their own people. They're selling them out in the name of special interest and money. I don't understand why the Black Caucus ain't all up in arms about marijuana laws, knowing that they were racistly, enacted, and knowing that alcohol is a worse drug than marijuana. I mean, it doesn't make sense to me. And these kids, they're doing 5 years in prison for having a dirty urine. Yeah, you might be on probation or parole for 20 years, but you see your PO, if you got weed in your urine, you're going to jail or prison. They might let you pass 4 or 5 times, but I don't care. You should be allowed to smoke weed if you want to smoke weed. It shouldn't be illegal, and you shouldn't have to go to prison for 5 years. And I'm not making apologies. The Black Caucus should be all over that. That killing their communities. These drug laws do more damage to the communities than the drugs themselves, and people are co-signing it. They're letting it happen, and it frustrates me. Me and my wife talk about this frequently. Why are we always blowing the whistle, taking all the criticism? Why ain't other people in an uproar about this stuff? Just spread some of this criticism and uproar around. Because, hell, we getting old. We ain't going to be around forever. Who's the new people going to come along and take on these issues? Drug laws kill people. They ain't helping nobody. They made our systems worse. You could probably have a dozen drug laws and leave it at that. You don't need 298 million drug laws on the books,
So a trick question I ask my students every semester at VCU is, how many laws do we have on the books? And the reason is a trick question is no one can answer it because no one knows how many laws.
Actually, I read about that the other day.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's the millions. All around the country, state, federal, you got a law against everything. For
Absolutely.
Everything, against everything.
There's a book out there, 3 felonies a day, saying every time you just go out.
I remember hearing about that book the other day. It is so true.
Now, speaking of even more laws, I understand there's more laws cracking down on recovery institutions, recovery industry. Again, I mentioned earlier, people are concerned about abuse programs that are just billing insurance without actually providing a service.
That's a shame too, because there's a handful of areas in the country, Florida, California, Arizona, just to name a few. Yeah, they had some insurance fraud associated with recovery issues, but that's just not, most of the country doesn't have those issues. So they wasted a lot of recovery capital on some things that probably shouldn't have been an issue in the first place. And I know there were some treatment centers, mad at other treatment centers because they didn't like the way they got customers. It's, the recovering industry is turning the guns inward and shooting themselves right now. Hell, I know who the bad players are, who to stay away from, and what to do and not to do, and most other people do too.
So, I opened this saying that, my introduction to McShins was hearing a judge let someone out of jail upon, on bond, someone's getting into your program. That being said, more recently, so instead this person has a program lined up, a treatment program, so will you give them a bond? Judge said, well, we know there's a lot of dubious programs out there. And, it only takes one bad egg to spoil the bunch. And that's something that causes concern.
Yeah,
Because, when you have a program that's saving lives, and do people get in there and exploit it with their fake programs to profiteer, it discredits. And that's alarming. People will die because they won't go into treatment. Judges won't let them out of jail to get treatment they need.
I can understand not letting somebody out of jail if they're very toxic, they're opiate addicts, they're toxic, they're just going to go overdose and die. I get that. And that's, I think, what a lot of this really is. So, good for the judges. Some of the rhetoric comes from competitors trumping up negative perception. And competitors is everything from other operators to government agencies. And if you think about it, like the Richmond metropolitan area, we now have over 500 recovery beds in the community. Might be 700. Last time I counted, we had over 500 beds. Now, keep in mind, 94% of our population is going to be rearrested. 94%. Now, we're reducing that by 40%. Remember that number earlier?
Right.
So all of a sudden, we're taking out of play several hundred criminal justice beds, okay? And that's going to double every few years. Like the city jail went from 1,500 inmates down to 900 inmates. Why is their population going way down, but the county population going way up? And not because they developed Scott's Addition and everybody moved out of the city. No, it's because one jurisdiction is pumping up the criminal justice system of care, and the other one's going to other systems. And it's happening all across the state and all across America. Good God, I talked so long about a certain sentence, I forget where I was going with it.
Well, let me ask you this. Speaking of places within Virginia, is there anywhere you think that's doing things right? Is there any city or county in Virginia that you think should be used as a model for others? If so, why?
Ain't nobody doing it right, as far as I'm concerned. Now, there are a lot of agencies doing some things right, and they want to do some things right, but we don't have enough collective agencies doing it all right at the same time. And that's the problem. Everybody needs to keep doing what they're doing right, but we need to come together and do it right more. And I know where I was going earlier with the judges. Another thing to remember, they got probation districts in the metropolitan area. And so all of a sudden, District 32, for example, I never realized we were such a problem to them. But if you stop and think about it, if we got 200-300 sober beds in their district, what does that do to their caseload? That increase their caseload, doubles it or triples it, which means they got to go to DOC and get some more managers, more POs, and they got a lot more work to do, which is good, if they can figure out how to do their job and do the work. And they try hard, so I'm not knocking nobody on this particular segment. What I'm saying is, as a result of recovery, we brought a lot more customers in some of these industries in this area, to include public safety, ambulances, police, POs. It's concentrated. And I think we need to work together on how to better serve this population together as a team, TEAM, together everybody achieves more, rather than pointing the cannons inward and shooting at each other. Start pointing the finger. They should have done this. They should have done that. We have an opportunity to help so many people in one concentrated area. We should be serving each other doing it. So over and over and over again, Scott. I mean, Matt. You look like Scott Mills almost without the glasses, Matt.
Actually, my brother's name's Scott. He looks like me, so I get that all the time.
But Matt, over and over and over, how do I put this? We have an opportunity to help so many people. We got them concentrated. But the police, the fire, the ambulance, the POs, the CSBs, they all get fully funded budgets and money. We're the first ones to get these addicts in many cases, and we don't get a penny. We can't get a nickel reimbursement. I'm not asking for startup money or operation money, but if I take an addict off the street, before they commit a crime and get arrested, that has some value not only to the taxpayers but to the community as well as that individual and their families. And we have a system to get these people off the street.
What is that system?
Well, number one, we invite them to recovery. The minute they need it, come get it. Number two, if they detoxing from opiates, we hook them up with the detox medication and makes them so they don't keep committing crimes, getting opiate. Number three, we put them in a safe, secure environment, a sober living environment with other people, like-minded people that want to recover. You got to get people away from their old places, people, places, and things, playmates and playgrounds. You get them out of the bar, you get them in the recovery house, they're going to do better. 40% will do okay.
And where are you getting the money to do all this?
We got to raise it ourselves. We raise our own money. We have a payer mixed population. We have a program that we can sell that makes a little bit of money. We have bed fees we charge once you get a job and can pay your bed fee. So we have a scale, so we have everything from indigents. Out of 50, out of 100 sober beds, 50 of them, we might collect the bed fee weekly. The other 50,
how much is that fee?
$135 a week.
Okay.
And and people want to complain about that. Well, good Lord, how much a week it costs to be in jail?
I think it's about $90 a day, $70 to $90 a day
to
keep someone in jail. City of Richmond, I think it's about $90, $94 a day.
You give me anybody else's budget, I'll solve our addiction problem for the most part. You're always going to have a handful of people, no matter what agency or person helps, they're going to screw up. But the starting point, Matt, is to simply fund people like us. Reimburse us what we need when we need it, and let us do what we do best, and we'll cut our addiction impact by 40%.
Okay. This is almost a good place to wrap up, but there's so much more I want to ask about your program, especially with the numbers. How much are you going through a year right now financially to make everything happen?
Well, I think our peak year we did over $2 million in revenue that we kind of scrapped, fought, and raised on our own. We had a lot of competition pop up around. A lot of people came through McShin and thought this was a moneymaker. They went and started their own sober home organizations and recovery organizations, and so that draws away some of our capacity. But the good news is we got more capacity in the area. The bad news is it takes away a little bit from us. But we'll probably do $1.5 million this year in revenue.
And how many people will you have surfaced?
Well, we got 100 beds, over 100 beds. We probably might flip them 4 times a year. That's 400 or 500 people a year come through our sober living. And remember, we do over 2,500 groups and meetings a year. We get over 70,000 consumer visits a year. Wow. Just at McShin alone. And keep in mind, we damn near created or invented most of the other sober home capacity in the region. Most of these other players came through McShin or watched what we did and they copied us. So,
well, before we wrap up, if people want, have been listening, want to donate, want to contribute, where can they do that?
Go right online, McShin.org. You can drop it off over at the foundation but online what most people do, Facebook. We do lots of events, come anytime you want. And our doors are always open. You want to tour McShin? A lot of people like to, talk about, so come see what you're talking about. Come tour the place. We'll give you, every day of the week we're open for tours. Anybody want to see what we do, how we operate? Know what you're talking about. We're very transparent, most transparent organizations I ever met. So,
outstanding. Any last words before we?
I just think my last words are: if you're a loved one or a family member, you got somebody who might need help, give us a call. We'd be glad to help. You can come in for free assessment, free appointment. If you got court cases, call us. We can help you navigate some challenges you might be facing. Our motto is healing families, saving lives. So, that's what we like to do.
Outstanding, John. Thank you so much for coming on, for sharing the good work done by your program. I look forward to sharing this with our listeners. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.